I don't think they tested the.
Times change. Looks like
They
you're
came
talking
down
about the TV.
All right, start again.
Sounds good.
Everybody's here, got a couple new faces. All right, so we always start out with introductions. So I'm Roger Rail, I'm chair of Card and chair of Silos, and it's for Safe Water. I've been working on this issue as a citizen volunteer, and in my 25th, almost 26th year, starting.
I'm just, guy standing in the back, it just hurts for me to sit, so. Brian Nagel, I'm the assistant AG assigned to the case.
Kevin Lund, engineer DEQ.
Kathy Knowles, Scioto Township trustee.
Priscilla Cheever, I live in the Westover Hills neighborhood, and I'm substituting for Beth Collins, who wasn't able to make the meeting today.
I'm Phil McMillian, also live in Westover Hills neighborhood.
I'm Sarah Nedrich. I'm with Department of Environmental Quality, Remediation and Redevelopment Division. I'm the District Enforcement Coordinator.
Gerald Turner, I'm with DEQ Remediation and Redevelopment Division. I'm the Jackson District Supervisor.
Vince Crusoe with the board member of the Card Group, board member of Sierra Club, Huron Valley Group, and coordinating member for the Allen Street Watershed Group.
Me? I'm Dan Hamill. I'm a board for the DEQ in Jackson, and I'm the project manager for the DEQ in the Gelman site. So the contacts me. What?
We mentioned that.
I got the memo. I got the memo.
I'm Jenny Kahn with Washtenaw County Environmental Health. I'm the Environmental Quality Analyst.
Kristen Schweikofer. I'm the Environmental Health Director with Washtenaw County Health Department.
I'm Shauna Milkey. I'm a resident of Ann Arbor, and I'm the secretary for Card Group.
Max Pettibone, local resident.
Kevin Thompson, local resident.
Okay.
And Roger, I just want to interrupt you real quick. The meetings are video recorded and voice
That's right.
recorded, so just so
Don't-
everyone
Don't say
knows.
anything incriminating.
If you're uncomfortable, want to say something, we can
Yeah.
turn them off.
And if you don't like being on camera, you can be like Brian.
He's learning, yeah.
So Shannon, you want to,
I move that we approve the minutes from the July meeting, and this is a vote for the board members of Card.
Okay, that.
All right, so all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so the minutes are passed. And incidentally, the minutes for 2018 to date are posted on the Washtenaw County Card website, and we are also working on getting them posted on Card's own website. But if anybody would like to look at the past approved minutes, there's a link to them from the Washtenaw County site.
Yes, with the agendas.
Thanks for doing them.
Yeah, and
Appreciate it.
Jenny has posted them, so thank you for that. Okay.
so I guess we're into the DEQ update at this point.
Okay. I only have a couple of bullets. I'm sure we can entertain some questions. I have scheduled the surface water sampling event that I said would be in September. It's going to be September 18th and 19th, tentative. Sarah will be helping me. And again, for those of you that don't remember what our plans are, is we're going to sample for Sister Lake, Second Sister Lake, Third Sister Lake, the Smith Ponds, Little Lake, and then several places along the unnamed tributary of Honey Creek. We're past the discharge, downstream of the discharge of the Gelman facility there at Park Road, Jackson Road, and right by the discharge. We're going to do Honey Creek near Dexter Road where it crosses, and Honey Creek at the Huron River where it goes into the Huron River. And then we're also going to sample at Allen Creek at some of the same locations that we've done in the past, which is West Park, the drain in West Park, and the one near Vince's house there at
Glendale and
Glendale.
Liberty.
Mhm. So we're planning on that. We've done that in the past, and we September sampling event will be considered more of a dry end of the dry season, end of summer, and so we'll see what those what the results are there, and we'll have some seasonal variations of what we're hitting in the surface water, and so that is, like I said, on the calendar. anybody has any questions, you can, give me an email, or if you come up with anything after this meeting, I can give you an update. We will be also during that same time frame. I haven't got dates yet, but we will do split sampling of the monitoring wells with Gelman, like we normally do. A couple, 3-4 times a year. I try to do quarterly, but sometimes it gets, we just can't schedule it. So it's that same time frame in September, October. One of the reasons I don't want to set a date is we have been asked, and I have asked Gelman to allow Dr. Lemke from Central Michigan University would like to tag along and take some split samples of the same wells that we're splitting with, some of the wells that we're splitting with Gelman. When I mean split, I mean, for those of you that don't know, is Gelman has their own laboratory, an in-house laboratory. So they are required under the consent judgment to sample monitoring wells under approved sampling plans. They send they analyze the results from the groundwater samples out of those monitoring wells at their lab. When I split samples, I gather a split at the same time of the groundwater sample, and I send it to the DEQ lab. So we have two laboratories that kind of check each other. In fact, they use different methods too. So we get a check and balance, or a check to see if the accuracy on their sampling. And then Dr. Lemke wants to sample the same wells and do not only the analytical, but he's also going to do some work, some analysis of to see if there has been natural biodegradation of 1,4-dioxane in the wells. So he's going to be doing some research himself and a graduate student, one of his graduate students. So I haven't picked the data split sampling because we haven't got a final approval by from Gelman to that we can schedule all this with them. So, but we're going. We've already made that request, and I will be following up on that request. So sometime in September, October, at a minimum, I will be splitting samples like I normally do with Gelman.
What were those dates again, 16, 17?
18th and 19th were the surface water sampling dates. It's a Tuesday and Wednesday. I have to coordinate that in with Gelman, because part of the sampling is on their property, which is, we have to go back through their lock gates. So I coordinate that with them. And then once on the other ones, then I have to also coordinate with the University of Michigan for Third Sister Lake, and to let them know we're going to be on their property. And then also, we then go along and to the roads, and where the creeks and streams cross over, that's where we'll get out and take a split sample. So,
do you have...
Or sample, not split sample.
I know you've provided like a image of the sample locations. Do you have like GPS coordinates for those sample locations? And
so we have, yeah. I think I thought I sent them to you, but we do have them.
Yes.
We can, again, they're latitude, lon, or XY.
Good. Yeah, I think you did too.
Yeah, we
Just can't find it.
Let's see, anything else that really is, again, we have been getting the data from Gelman as we normally do. I am behind on posting that data on our website. I've been getting caught up. I've been trying to update our database. I had some problems with getting the residential well sampling that has been done to date from Washtenaw County. So I've corrected my problem, and we should have the June data in the database on the web page, on our web page here within a week. And then some of the other documents that I put on, the analytical reports that we get monthly from Gelman. I'm behind a month. The second quarter quarterly report that we received from Gelman, that will be posted here soon. and those types of documents. Like I said, I'm a little behind, and everything has been put into who I have to send it to get it posted on our webpage, so it should be up there soon. I told her it was coming. I said I was behind, and you're going to be inundated.
Any target, when you say soon, like
I
this month? or-
I think this month, yes. This month, yeah, I can safely say that. I don't want to give a date because, again, it's, for those of you that don't know, because we are the state agency, so I send her documents that I want posted. She has to convert those to ADA compliant documents, for American disabilities, so they have to be posted on our webpage, with, and I don't know exactly what she has to do, but they have to be ADA compliant.
Yeah, because we're in August,
Hmm?
and we still don't have the June data, and of course, we don't really have the July data yet. but-
No, I get the data by the 10th of the following month, so I had the data. And if you remember, I sent out,
And
some of
you
the
send-
data-
yeah, you send it to me, but.
yeah, I send it out to a core group of people, and then I post it on the webpage. Well, the back half of July is just, like I said, I got behind, and the database was giving me trouble, and I just didn't get it in to get posted, so.
And you took a much needed
Yeah,
vacation.
I think it's-
Well,
Gone
the
on
vacation was
vacation,
before
too.
that, and my
Yeah,
goal.
but you had to catch up.
Yes,
from
you're
the
right,
vacation.
you're right. I'm not gonna, so I am behind, but they all are into our IT people to be posted. And then I will send out a notice like I normally do on our listserv, which if you're signed up, you'll get a notice that said, hey, this data has been posted. And it goes, go ahead.
So, is there any, or what is the latest data on the Vets Park area? What is that well? It was over 1,000 at one point.
Yeah,
I'm just curious if there's been any updates on that, or what the current value for the West Park area is, or Vets Park.
I don't recall off the top of my head what the June data was, and then it is also related to certain wells. Like I said, we have approved sampling plans for the eastern area, which includes where that is at, the western area, and a little lake area. So not all wells are sampled monthly. They are, some of them are sampled quarterly, some are twice a year, yearly. So I just don't recall off the top of my head what the June, whether any June updates and what that range would be. And I didn't bring my computer to get into the database. That's going to be, what wells would be,
I think what Vince is concerned about,
84,
It's
right?
the ones that are leading down towards West Park.
Yeah, well, just
So
to
we
get a
got
handle on
82S here
what,
that-
what these
80,
numbers.
yeah.
So this is getting up to 400, but it spiked at 1,000.
I question that. I think that's a,
It's an aberration.
I think they
It
just.
is,
keep
we are,
it
it's an analytical
Yeah,
lab.
yeah, yeah.
There's a lot of,
The trend is obvious there.
yeah, we sometimes, there's some things that happen with analysis at labs, so. But I know that the 82 was just under, in the 300s. And what I don't recall, if that's Park, would be 84 cluster, right? And that's further up toward Maple.
Yeah.
And that's a, isn't that the 84 cluster there?
Yeah,
84, 83.
No, it's just, I'm gonna bring it up in the next item here.
At 83,
It's
even though it says S, it's really not really the same S. So this is, in the last few years, it's gone up too, so. That's another quarter mile, half mile up.
Yeah.
So I just didn't bring,
I'm just curious if we're having any additional information on that, and what the current high you might be. So that's
Here's
it.
your 84.
Yeah, so it's at 700.
So you see how it bounces down once you back up again.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Roger.
And for those of you who don't know, I mean, I post, I know people sometimes have trouble or have identified trouble, but there's a database that we maintain. It's in the Microsoft Access platform. So you have to have Microsoft Access to look at it. And you can go to individual wells and get the history of the sampling. So you can.
Yeah, but that's an issue, by the way. Because I had to access as part of my U of M affiliation, but that ran out. So I used the SRSW nonprofit status and something called, I forget what the consortium is that provides cheaper software for worthy nonprofits. And I could get Microsoft Office for like $40 or whatever it was, but it didn't include Access, so I had to buy that separate. Now we have funds in SRSW to do that, but the only reason I have Access is so I can take your database and then export the 2 Excel spreadsheets from it that I use for all this Google Earth mashups. So for any layperson, it would be, I think it would behoove the DEQ to consider doing those export steps. You basically take your Access database and you do export the data and export the wells.
And put them in.
An Excel format.
Okay, which is easy to do.
And then that's a lot smaller too.
And then do what with that?
We'll share that instead of the Access database.
So post that on the webpage. Okay. I mean,
That's what, consider doing it, because I might be the only one that's actually extracting from the Access database.
Well, and that's a point that I would make, you know, for the lay person. Okay, you're right, Access, you have to use the Access platform, but the Access platform allows you to go in and go to a specific well and get a history, a report, a preliminary report of this is starting in 1988, it was this, and all the way through. You can do some rough plots with that. So the flip side of that, so
Maybe do both.
I put it out, there's only gonna be a selected number of people, what are they gonna do with the Excels anyway, so, but, you know, that's something we can consider.
The charts that are built in to the Access database have some issues.
Oh, I don't disagree with you, Rod.
Yeah.
But it was, it was what was, the history of that, Gelman
did the original.
Did the original design,
Right.
the Access, the database. And then we got that from them, and then we have been maintaining the information. We get the information from them monthly, and I put it into the Access. So, yes, it was just, the original reason for the database was just to be able to get the information on, to a layperson in a format that would be a little bit more understanding. Like I said, a printout of the dates and concentrations of a particular well. Match that up then with the maps that are available online, the base maps, and you can see where things are.
So, Roger, I think Open Office Space says here it's compatible with Access. So that's a free software, it's open source. I would imagine you could probably download that file. It might be nice to put a link to that on the DEQ site if people don't want to spend the money for Microsoft Access. This is a free software.
I probably can't put a long link on our state database to the free software. It would be like recommendation of this, so I probably can't do that. But
Well, it is open source. so
Well,
it's
my
not-
guess would be if anybody really wants to look at it, they can figure that out themselves.
All right, well, we
You
can
know.
put
Or
it maybe
they're
on our-
free to contact Dan. Dan's email's on there. If someone had a specific question and needed it in a specific way,
Well, wait a minute.
I mean,
you could manipulate it to
Yeah,
their.
that was my first thought was, is I'm sure that there's gotta be another, free software
Yep.
out there that you can use to open an
Compatible,
access
yeah.
file. Yeah, yeah.
So we want to be
Quick Google search
Well,
and then
we
you're
want to be
in
customer
business.
friendly,
Yeah,
right?
and I have been, I have no problem getting a call if someone's very interested
Yeah, yeah.
in monitoring wells near where they live. I have sent out, printed out and made PDF copies of the files, of the data and the plots that I can get out of Access. And sent them on to an email address and,
Mhm.
as long as it's not, I want all 250 wells or plus wells. 304, Roger, what was the number you were thinking, you kind of critiqued, or but as long as a couple wells here and there, as we have done that, and we'll continue to do that.
Well, the card group could put a link to the base, open office base.
We actually, in SRSW, we share the data in its unpacked form. But also in there, I show the corrected data.
Define your corrections, so people know what you're talking about.
For years now, I've been pointing out that there's data in the well logs and on certain Gelman cross-section diagrams that aren't in the database. So where possible, I've put some of those into the database before I do my displays. But it would be nice if all of those were up to date. In particular, like a lot of the TWs used to be, here's the yellow and orange are the areas that I've corrected here. This is from 2016. We know that they have the XY data, but it's just somehow didn't make it into the database. So some of there's a few key wells that we're not able to plot on on Google Earth on our maps because it's not in the official database. And it'd be nice to get that cleaned up before too long, before somebody forgets where the source data is.
Well, the other thing is a lot of communities are requiring their organizations to use open source software that's available to anybody. So
Well,
that's a requirement of some communities now.
it's certainly feasible to export this in tab delimited format, which is open source.
Right, right,
But
right.
to use the data, there's certain gotchas. It takes me better part of a day to clean up the data before I can start doing any of my magic Google Earth mashups. Because there's just some database issues that, are not up to snuff. And it's not your fault, Dan, it's the way it was set up. And then as we go forward, there's some fields that really should be added. Like to the well database, it would really be nice to know if a well has been plugged and when it was plugged.
A lot of times that's in the comments section, but
Yeah,
Roger
as you go
can't.
forward, well, look at all the wells that are being sampled, except, wait a minute, a lot of those are no longer being sampled. And so somebody looking at it, so look at all those sample locations, but they're not being sampled anymore.
Right. Well, again, there are 2011, there are 3 monitoring plans that we are currently, that have been approved, that have the wells required to be sampled by Gelman in the consent judgment. And those sampling plans are posted on the webpage under the.
So there's 596 sample locations, sample.
Historic through the
records.
years. Right.
And some of those are one-off, and some of them are, you know, entry errors and things like that. But
So I want to bring us back to the agenda. Would this be a good, to table the DEQ's issues to another meeting? At least so we can get through our agenda for today.
yeah, I just want to point out that as we go forward many decades, we're diverging from, the databases are diverging. And I'd like those to converge, ideally to one central, accurate, up-to-date database that everybody can access, instead of having a separate one here, separate one there, missing data from past years and stuff like that. Because as this cleanup winds down, someday in the future when we're all gone, nature's gonna take back over. And people administering it then really might wanna know what were the early conditions. What happened? And if that data's lost, they're gonna be at a disadvantage. So that's all I'm gonna say.
I think too, we could have a responsible party, you know, covering these costs. We don't, as a
Oh,
state,
absolutely.
state need to be spending money on this.
That's
We
true.
have- I mean, we got a responsible party. We want to make this as user-friendly as possible, not make it difficult for the affected communities to
We want
gain.
a responsible party instead of a semi-responsible party.
I would agree.
Any other DEQ?
No, unless anybody has any questions, like I said, we're kind of, in the summer was a holding pattern of what they normally do, nothing new.
So one more question. So any discussion within the DEQ about upgrading its testing method to the more modern EPA standard with a lower part per billion?
No, the only discussion was at the meeting was potentially doing the lab is not upgrading, but potentially collecting some samples like we did with the city of Ann Arbor a couple of years ago.
Send them out to a separate lab.
We'll send them out to their lab, right.
So I would encourage that to get more refined data on some of these wells that are, you know, near drinking water sources and such.
On the periphery especially.
So we can see a trend more clearly. You know, we can see if it's going to be an issue for certain residential wells and make plans for that more effectively.
Also, so you have a heads up on the peripheral, if, you know, if it's a half a part per billion, you'd know it a year, months ahead of when it needs to be. 1 part per billion, what we'll expect.
You realize that, you know, what you're asking, I mean, that's a strictly cost to the state. So Gelman will not pay that. The CJ currently has their required analysis, 1624. And
Well,
so
I think the Card Group has said it once before and many times before that we would like to see a more deep, more modern testing method being used, and that I think the DEQ needs to present that request to the responsible party, so it's on the record. And so when there's a question as to is the responsible party acting responsibly or not, this may weigh in as to, you know, that information. I think it'd be worth having that on the record. I think, you know, we keep asking here in the Card Group that it needs to be passed on, I think, as well to the responsible party.
We're in negotiations.
Okay.
I mean,
I just want to make sure that that's.
they know of the method, they know of the questions.
And they know that we're requesting.
Yeah, they know the
upgrading.
questions that we are getting, so.
Well, wouldn't that
But currently realize that the current CJ does have the method that they're required to do.
And when was that put in?
That was the CJ, whatever the last mod was.
11 was the last
2011.
But was it there before that? Was that just a carry forward?
I'd have to, I don't recall whether that
Are we
was.
just dealing with a 26-year-old analysis?
Standard, yeah.
And what's it gonna be?
Realize that the methods that are being used by Gelman and DEQ are EPA-approved methods for analysis for environmental contamination. And
Well, that's true.
Also
Well,
realize that
Are they the best?
Well,
That's
they
how
are
you're defining best.
they are approved methods for, and as long as the detection limit is, is usable. In this particular case, the new drinking water number is 7.2. The methods are getting down to 7.2 ppb, and the method detection level is 1 ppb.
They couldn't do less than 1 part per billion back 26 years ago.
And the standard has dropped dramatically from 85 to 7.2. So to look at trending towards that 7.2, I think we would be much better off with
Well, the
with
states
better
that are
analysis.
using 1 in a million cancer risk over a 70-year lifetime have a standard for dioxane of 0.35 parts per billion. So they are already using the new analysis technique because they have a tighter standard.
How many states?
How many?
Yeah.
I don't know. There's no good tally of how many, but, like Massachusetts and
California.
out in
California, the East Coast, New Hampshire.
East Coast for sure, yeah. So it's not like, that they can't have their own standard that's better than the EPA standard. Michigan could do that too, but, we just have to decide to do it.
Again, we've got 7.2, you get a detection limit of 1. I'm covered. It's covered.
Now, there's some downsides. You have to have a bigger volume of water. And in some cases, it might cost more, although the city got theirs for less or the same price that they were doing the older analysis technique.
That was the
overall lab cost.
Yeah, the lab
was the same.
Same.
The cost to complete the sampling, including the shipping of the samples, is more.
There's a big difference. The 522 method uses 1 to 2, 500 milliliter, which is a bottle about that big, a glass bottle, of water. That's what the lab wants.
Right,
And
so
most
you're
of them want
talking
to.
about costs right now.
Well, that's one of the,
And costs.
and
Logistics in the field primarily.
Yeah, so-
Where does that come into decision making?
But we don't need it. If we
Yeah.
see at 1 part per billion and our standard is 7, we
Right.
don't, but you're referring to states that have to see it below a part per billion, so they need to run the 522 to evaluate and comply with their criteria that they have established.
Well,
Michigan
if
established.
Michigan's decides to change the lifetime exposure to 70 years, then it would drop to 3.5. Would that be close enough
maybe.
to 1 that you would start wanting a better technique?
Probably not. We've got other criteria for other contaminants, like vinyl chloride, for example, is 2 part per billion, and our detection level that we use in the lab is 1
Still
part
one.
per billion.
There's some other organic, like Kevin said, some other organic.
Benzene is 5, and we use a lab that gives us 1. Is their expectations.
Well, I would like to say that I think the community in general, we've done tables for the last 8 years at different events. The community at large, generally speaking, wants more data, not less data. They want to know what the trends are. They want to know if they're drinking 2 part per billion or 1 part per billion. And I think if we had the more modernized analysis, we would have a much better feel for, what the trends are and what people are being exposed to. And I think that's what CARD would like to see happen.
And it's not the
I mean,
current
we
exposure.
understand the request, so.
Okay.
I mean,
Just to make it clear what the
Probably the
rationale
4th
is.
meeting we brought it up, so we've got it noted. I don't mean to be short, but I just don't want to lose a meeting here, so.
No, I was gonna say, it's maybe the fourth meeting you've been to. I've heard it at every
Okay.
meeting I've been to, so we know.
And Paul's response is, when you're negotiating with them, what's their response?
I can't discuss the negotiations.
But you have discussed it with them.
We
Can't
couldn't
even
violate
talk about that either.
That's why I call it confidential.
Well, I'm assuming you've discussed it with them because we've been talking about it for a long time. That's
Okay.
all
All
I'm
right,
saying.
should we move on to 4?
Can I ask you one question, Deb?
Sure.
You talked about PFAS testing at the end, so any news on that or update on
The, well, what we have requested from Gelman is a review of their records as a first step, as the overall PFAS in Washtenaw County. So we've asked them to review their records to see if PFAS chemicals it could be a possibility where they in use, in the process, that type of thing. And we have not received that, if you want to say that, review yet. So that's where the first step for us was to get their records, and then as we coordinate not only Gelman, but all other sites and within Washtenaw County, do it at that, then move on to sampling specific areas. So
Yeah,
sampling.
Gelman's not the only site
But,
that
yeah.
we're looking at for people.
I know.
We had a question about PFAS update for Gelman. I said
Okay.
we've done asked them for the review of the records and have not received that yet.
When did you ask?
Well, we've asked them multiple times.
Yeah, we've
recently
updated.
followed up as soon as, was it yesterday or Friday, right?
It was late last week.
Followed
Yeah,
up, I think it was
last
last week we followed up with them, so.
We basically asked when, I think when Berkoff brought it up, Michael Berkoff.
Our original request probably was
3 or 4
I
months
hate to
ago.
throw out an expectation, but I expect by the next quarterly report or update to EPA that we'll know.
we'll have
by then.
additional information.
And there is a lot going on with PFAS, so.
You know.
So, is there any suspicion that there was something used at that site?
We have no indication.
No indications? No
If you review
usual
P-
suspects?
right, I mean, the PFAS
It's
in
used in
the
certain-
environment was, there's,
It's used in many, many applications.
in Washtenaw
by
County,
many businesses.
as in all across the state, is,
Farmers.
it's,
Yeah.
we have no specific indication that the
They did
process,
use it.
that they used it, that any more than any other manufacturing facility or any other process. So that's one of the reasons why we want to make sure that we gather the information and kind of do this in, as not just a Gelman issue, but, an initial ongoing, and let's find out what the overall problem is, and if we, and then.
Yeah, real quick, right, so we have the surface water sampling that's happening in multiple watersheds. Those results are then being used with people like RD, us, with our 201 and 213 sites, mostly 201 sites. Waste is also looking at their landfills that they regulate. The RIPRA program, the Superfund program are looking at their sites. And then we're going back and starting to look at some of those sources and ask some of those questions of those potential sources. And that's kind of where we're at right now. Overall, in southeast Michigan, so to speak, or in this area is, we've got some surface water sampling that's showing that it's above 70 in the surface waters in several areas. So you've seen the fish, like I've used a while because of the fish testing. And we're at the point right now where we're in discussions and having meetings across divisions because these watersheds don't stick in divisions. So we're having discussions with other divisions and having, a larger thought on how is this getting here. Land application of biosolids also is a question that's being looked at quite heavily. My initial take is that that's going to be a bigger player, I think, in some of the surface water stuff we see than what I would call more of a point source discharges. which I'm sure there are point source discharges, but overall to a watershed, I can see the biosolid runoff being a larger issue just overall because of, fertilized discussions and stuff of that. It's common, we know that, so. But they have a whole subgroup within the MPARC group, the state response, that's specifically looking at the biosolid applications, so.
Yeah, Gelman just had a map of one of the areas where, I don't know if it's Escoda, I think it was, where they were, where the biosolids were. put
Yeah,
on.
and I think almost every watershed's gonna end up with, some type of map such as that's gonna identify sources. And we're gonna find that they're everywhere. I mean, the potential for this chemical is very high to be all over the place.
So what's the
And health
detection
department
limit typically for these?
1 PPT with a 70,
Oftentimes tighter than dioxane.
1 PPT.
And then also all of the municipal water
Yeah,
sources in
you're right.
Michigan are being tested, as well as any school that's on a well. And I think Washtenaw County's testing wraps up this week, and we have 38 on that list between municipal sources and schools.
School and buildings had 130 somewhere.
So, yeah.
Say, and Ann Arbor supply has been being tested for the last couple of
Yeah,
years.
it's part of the
so we have-
unregulated contaminant testing, and that's
Yeah.
all in their consumer confidence report. Yeah.
We don't know where it's coming from. But getting back to the Gelman site, so they haven't reported yet back on the PFAS, whether they ever used it.
Right.
And we don't have the data for their recent shallow soil sampling that they did starting in
So I think that's a question on
March
November
of
4th, so we
2017.
keep following the agenda.
Does anybody have any more of my updates or any questions of what we're going on day to day, under the Gelman, So, okay, then we
Carry
move
on.
forward.
Well, I
So
think
we're on
that does
4A.
fall into
Yeah.
that area of whether we've been expecting to see these samples they were supposed to take a year and a half ago, and still don't have them.
Yeah, I don't have any update on that.
So I'll just point that out to everybody, that that's not normal, for this site. It's not normal. Now, Danaher did their own sampling independent of the Paul people and the Gelman people. So I hope this isn't a trend for Danaher to just drag their feet on releasing the data that they clearly have by now, they should have.
Was this the site we tested?
Well, this is one of them, this is how we knew it.
Yeah. The only way.
Well, you
Because
know,
we have an
because there was an
image of the-
application for the permit.
We have an image of their truck mats. And there's another app that's out there called planet.com that has daily images of the Earth every day. So I want to get the daily images so we can see exactly when they were doing their sampling.
For free? No cost?
Well, if you have the right entity, you can get it for free. Yes,
So Rita could possibly get it with you. then.
possible.
Yeah, for free.
Anyway, so this is something we shouldn't have to wait for satellite images to tell us. This is something that should be reported through the various government entities. Because it's our waters of the state that's affected.
That's part of the confidential negotiations.
They don't care if it's confidential, I'm just saying this needs to be done.
I agree, I'm just answering your question of where it's
Yeah,
at.
and how long is this confidential thing gonna go on? For another 5 years?
We hope not.
You know?
Realize we're just as
Dioxane's not gonna
frustrated.
wait, Dioxane's not gonna
Wait.
wait for the, to be public. Dioxane's not gonna care if you're doing confidential negotiations. Dioxane's gonna move in the groundwater. So I'm just pointing that out.
So I think Dan already covered 4B, that he's still getting caught up.
Yeah,
and will be caught up, so.
it's been sent to be posted, I anticipate here, I know in August, and then the other reports to, I guess, here.
All right. So are we on to Lockwood?
Well, Vince had a
Oh,
question
yeah.
for item 4C. Yeah.
That's okay, Roger.
Oh, I thought we did that.
No. Well, I think the Card Group in 2017 had asked the DEQ to formulate a plan for near-surface groundwater testing. I think that we need that. I think we need to know what the exposure potential is. I think there are changes in the standards that are making it more important to have a plan. For example, the groundwater surface water interface was lowered from 2,800 part per billion to 280 part per billion, if I'm not incorrect. Okay. So potentially you could, we have, numbers in the Vets Park area that range from 700 to 1,000 part per billion. If that moves and will move to the west or to the east, we could have homeowners pumping groundwater out of their basements in violation of the prohibition zone and the groundwater surface water interface at 280. If you allow 1,900, up to 1,900 for vapor intrusion near the homes, they could be pumping contaminated water into the Allen's Creek, into the Huron River in violation of that 280 part per billion standard. And that's just a gross, violation. I'm also concerned about homeowners not knowing what trends are going on in these potential exposures in people's basements. With the Allen Creek Watershed Group for the last 20 plus years, I've had a lot of homeowners talk to me about wet basements, basements that are wet year round, basements that have been affected by groundwater such that they have to replace their basement walls is very common, unfortunately. And way up, to Vets Park area, there's that going on from seeps and other groundwater problems with basements. So there's a lot of concern, I think, amongst the public, whether this is going to be a problem for them. I don't think, and this is my own opinion, I don't think the city of Ann Arbor residents should be forced to have basement exposures below quote-unquote a vapor intrusion standard that the state has set and have their property values affected and not have any recourse. I think that's inappropriate, and we can stop this exposure, and we should move in that direction. And I think having a database of potential exposures now will in the future allow us to make better predictions as to where these flows are going, which basements could be impacted, which basements are already impacted. Larry Lemke, at a Card meeting a year or 2 years ago, said he felt it's probably already in basements, probably already in the river, probably already in the Allen's Creek, but he doesn't have enough money to actually document that. So there's a lot of unknowns here that we need to get the responsible party to pay for, and if nothing else, we can say that there's a potential violation here. If you're pumping over 280 part per billion, you're in violation of the groundwater surface water interface standard. So I think Card is again asking that we devise a meaningful plan that monitors this more systematically. And I don't think we're doing that now, and I think we need to devise that plan, and I think the Card Group has asked for that in the past. I think we'd like to see it happen. And,
How much more time do we have?
yeah, I don't think we need to be waiting a
We
number of years.
don't know. The thing is, we don't know how much more time.
Well, we know it's moving towards these homes that are...
But we should have enough data that we
It
have some
wasn't,
idea.
this was
of
not in
how
the plan. When they set up a prohibition zone, there was never any discussion at all within any realm of possibility that this could percolate into people's basements and percolate to the surface and percolate to the near surface.
Well,
So-
remember, when that plan was put in place, the
cleanup is gonna take 5 years.
So I'm reiterating,
that's where
past
the
request
problem is.
we've made to the DEQ to come up with a plan that is not slapdash, quick and dirty, but has permanent wells, has regular sampling, and has modeling that would give us a handle on where these flows are headed and which homes may be at risk in the not too distant future. If we're at, in the 1,000 or so at Vets Park, I mean, we're talking like 11 blocks away. I would say it's at the surface at West Park. And so that high part per billion number could be percolating in people's basements in the not too distant. We're not talking 50 years from now. It could be in the next couple of years.
That's right.
And I think that's a real concern of the community, and I think there's already effects on the real estate. Real estate agents and published articles state that they're already finding reduced property values based on basement exposures. I've had real estate agents tell me personally that homeowners now are routinely asking for basement and near groundwater testing. So this is not some out there issue we're facing. This is something that's now, and we're asking again that the DEQ formulate a plan. And Dan McNeil, submitted some suggestions, and I thought they were legitimate. I think the Card group felt they were legitimate. And we need to work with that plan as a potential baseline for future study. And let the responsible party deal with this. This is their contamination. It's contaminating homeowners' basements, and they should be held accountable. Duly noted.
It is part of the negotiations of the.
Okay. Once again, putting that out there so that it's not something that's pushed off and pushed aside as a unimportant or unnecessary effort amongst all the other efforts, unfortunately, that we're involved in here with this contamination.
And so when you're talking to the realtors and they're telling you about people wanting the testing of their basements, are you then connecting them with Dan or DEQ because I know at one point DEQ was kind of keeping tabs on, which houses might have water near the basement.
Right. Yeah, I recommended they contact the DEQ, contact the city of Ann Arbor. I don't know if they do that or not. I'm not sure what the real estate agents are being told by the county and the city as far as sample information.
Those questions, so.
But you've actually given a talk to real estate agents. I know
About the Dioxane
Yeah.
plume, not specifically near surface groundwater.
Well, maybe if there's another discussion to be made with real estate folks, if you're planning on it, or if they ask for it, maybe you should add.
Certainly, we're open to questions, and that's not a question we've received from that group.
Okay.
So,
Well, I'm getting it from being on, at our, Green Fair tables. I did the Sierra Club Art Fair table. And I see published reports in the newspaper about real estate agents, making comment. I mean, if you search MLive, real estate agent Dioxane, you'll see the articles.
Somewhere, somebody had
I mean, I can find it right now.
a map of some wet basements.
DEQ kept track of all the calls they received or from homeowners.
I don't know if that's where it came from, or if it came from the city.
Well, we have that artesian map.
Well, I have that.
Artesian
That I
map.
do have, and that's, that's.
But I'm
that
not
was
sure
one of
that
the,
there's that map, yeah. But I think there's a lot of wet basements. I was told that there are seeps at Worcester Park, which is a very high elevation. I was really surprised that has seeps coming out of the hillside.
Well, again.
And that could be contaminated. And then maybe not now, but not too distant future, just like the West Park, these seeps.
Yeah, but not all seeps are connected to the contaminated aquifers. Some of those are from surface water, from rain events. But as you get down here where you're talking about, those seeps could definitely be the aquifer that's, say, in W82S, where the land surface falls away.
Yeah, it's a
and
very
the
steep
aquifers-
watershed.
The aquifer's exposed, but if we already have some information about wet basements, that should be part of the data set. And if more than one entity has that information, we should gather it together so that we have a more complete picture. So this is part of what I was asking for a couple meetings ago, for all the entities who are part of CARD to review what information they have and let it be known, let it make available to the other stakeholders in the group, so that we don't have to always go digging for the data. We just, we share the data among ourselves and with the public. And so I encourage everyone to do that. You know, if there's some data out there that's you've done for your own purpose, consider sharing it with the group.
So Roger, I don't know if you have Paul's map of the cross-section at West Park. It's on our watershed group site. But I mean, Paul's own map shows the cutaway. It's almost like a layer cake.
Yeah.
Where as you fall away to the river, it's exposing different layers. And I think, you know, West Park, you can see from Paul's own maps that potential exposure there. And then you have hundreds and hundreds of homes between West Park and the river. That's a mile, a distance of a mile. So you have all these potential exposures. It's a very steep watershed. It falls away very fast.
So here we are at NW82S. This is the aquifer. They've shaded in here. And this is back 2017. That was about 400 parts per billion, 370. And the land surface falls away. Now this original cross-section is what the company had presented. But then, using the information that Dan got on this one boring that you did at the 7th Street, this was the actual elevation. So this is really more what it looks like. But anyway, so this 300 and some parts per billion, maybe 400 now, as it makes its way down gradient, could come up to the surface or very near surface anywhere in this area. Because you already had a hit here. Now, what's tragic is that we don't have any permanent wells between here and here to have a heads up of when that's going to happen. And this is something we've been asking for. And I think that's the gist of what you're saying, is you need more sampling in this ongoing sampling, so we can know what the exposures are going to be before they happen. We shouldn't wait for the exposures to happen.
Well, I think that the Paul map, or the Paul cross-section actually shows it.
This is it. This is the Paul cross-section with annotated, with up-to-date data.
But there's another one that actually is more instructive, that shows layers exposed as you fall away towards the river.
Well, that's what this shows.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the one that Larry left you a couple years ago.
It's on our website. I'm trying to find it, but it's the one that Dan presented and sent to the DEQ.
Dan has I have Dan's here someplace too.
So I think, you know, permanent wells are important. So that we, you know, have a better idea of where this contamination is and where it's headed. And so here's Dan's map that he showed. That you know, shows the wells, shows the contamination, and it shows this, you know, stratification as you go down, as you fall away. Mm-hmm. You know, the geology is very stratified, and Yeah, so I think, putting in that request again, that we get a better handle on potential basin exposures and near surface exposures. I think it's overdue that we have that.
Okay.
Lockwood? Is that you, Roger?
Yep. All right, so I took the Lockwood information, and there's some recent information about their infiltration plans.
Is anyone not super familiar with what the Lockwood development is? It's a retirement facility proposed on Jackson Road,
For the golf park.
north side of Belts.
3 acres contiguous to Dog Park.
So,
And it has, it's heavily affected by the dioxane, the original. I have 2 copies of, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you were referencing the soil report. I have 2 copies. If the DEQ would like one, and if the county would like one.
Yes, if I would.
This is the EPA guidelines for infiltration that you're handing out here.
Yes. Well, no, that's the Lockwood report from its consultant. I also have the EPA's, is this what you're thinking?
Yeah, that's what
I
I
have
was.
more copies of that. Great.
It turns out the EPA has guidelines for sites like this where you have infiltration over a known groundwater contamination. And what you should be doing to make sure that you don't exacerbate the problem.
And I also have,
I have this.
We got
more
it.
copies. You have that one?
You have this.
Yeah. From another,
If Dan has it, I have it. I'll take it if you don't want to, Roger.
let me just, this is, again, one of the Lockwood expert things that they've submitted to the planning commission.
I think I've got a question because I think I kind of can guess where this is going. Isn't this like all vacant land right now? Or mostly
It's
vacant?
vacant, and it has been historically.
So isn't the water that's infiltrating what would, from the development, be pretty much the same that's being infiltrated currently on
No,
the on the surface?
Because
Absolutely not.
they'd be paving over 3 acres essentially, and they.
Put it in one spot.
order to get their 4-story building.
Yeah, but-
They'd be boring very far. The water is 2 feet below the surface. So, and there, I'll stop, Roger.
It's
and let
not,
you
it's
talk.
not exactly vacant because it's a single family.
It's zoned for single-family residential.
single
Yeah,
family
but
parcel.
Family residence,
There are a bunch of houses or
Well, no,
several?
there are
or-
no,
There
it's
used to be
basically
one.
Oh, okay.
But-
3361?
this, the Lockwood people proposed to rezone it so
Yeah,
that they could put their 4-story, 95-unit apartment building with an associated 95-unit parking lot and loading zone and all the rest. So there's an issue about what will happen to the dioxane plume, as Roger has said. It's not just sitting there. So if you're going to be boring to put in your pilings to build the massive building in a place that there's already a lot of dioxane, what's going to happen? Is the plume going to move faster? Where will it go? Which direction? So it's another issue.
The wells on the site, so there's MW30IND, and then the original, it's not a monitoring well, but the original residence that used to be there, 3365 Jackson Road. I had the well log for that one. Dan gave me 30 IND today. I haven't really looked for them, but 3365 Jackson, when that well was drilled, I mean, there's a significant clay layer of over 40 feet between basically 50 and 90 feet below ground surface. And then the dioxane that is being detected in like 30 IND is much deeper, like anywhere 200 feet, 140, 200 feet.
I
So
have,
to me,
yeah.
that,
30.
based on that, it's only one log, but there's a clay layer confining the dioxane to the deeper aquifers.
But if they disturb the clay layer, then what happens?
They wouldn't be going down 50 feet with
that part
any
of
infiltration
the
from the
due
surface.
care, a due care plan that they'd have to submit to the state?
They do not have to submit a due care plan to the state.
They don't?
They have to sell, they still have due care obligations, but they don't have to ask us per se.
Gotcha.
Where is this in the planning process? The city?
The city planning commission has rejected it and asked for a lot more information.
Or tabled it.
They tabled it, you're right, they tabled it. They've asked for a lot more information about the dioxane situation and what impact it would have, because again, the consideration would be that this is something that's been vacant now for decades, and it would all now be disturbed. And one of the critical monitoring wells is on that parcel, and they're proposing just to get rid of that well entirely, so.
That would be this guy right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
3365, it was a water supply well that Gelman it's in the sampling plan, and they sample it once a year.
They have
The in-
4 wells on the 3 acres.
Is it 4 or 3? 3. Well,
You may be correct.
And its intake interval is 104 feet. So they're getting their water from 100 to 104 feet. And they have concentrations as they've had basically have had high concentrations back in the 90s, but currently the concentration in the yearly sampling event is 150 to 200 parts per billion. Again, that intake, where that contamination is 100 foot down. And by the boring logs that Jenny identified and the other wells that are on there, 30I and 30D, you do have clay layers in between, which an evaluation that does, more protective of infiltration from shallower. And really the dioxane that is being detected is really in the deeper water-bearing zones anyways, coming across from the Gelman site.
How do you know there isn't dioxane shallower?
I guess, Roger, I don't have a very good answer for you other than just what the general interpretation of the geologic material have been in monitoring wells around that area. So the different aquifers that have been identified through site investigation activities over the years.
So there's been shallow water tests, shallow ground,
No, I didn't.
near surface groundwater tests?
No.
During the drilling activities, there's been vertically profiled samples.
Have they sampled as they go down at all? or-
Yeah, well, the wells they've installed along, they did a fence along Wagner Road,
Right.
and then, the monitoring well's 90 to 98 or so. And those wells were installed vertically profiled.
Right.
And what we were seeing, or what they observed during those actions were that there was, no detections or low detections of 1,4-D.
Down to where?
Well, I'd have to go and look at the boring logs and the information are online and are
Okay.
available to look at.
Okay.
And they actually have the data that in those boring logs of what the results were at those different depths. So specifically, I couldn't tell you, Vince, but.
But your impression is it's not.
It's available.
It's not, my interpretation is not near, at that location, it's not near the surface.
How many of the borings did they not sample for shallow groundwater?
Yeah, well, that's
So-
sort of the question I was wondering is, do they start sampling when they first hit water? Or do they, wait till
No, sometimes
somewhere
they might
deeper?
go like, 10, 15, 20 feet below the water table before they grab a water sample. And it's not consistent. I mean, we don't have a standard work plan. This is what we start doing at this point.
Didn't you, when you did your Rockworks data, wasn't one of the layers, wasn't one of the sets where you took the lithology data? I think Larry Lemke originally did it. Didn't you incorporate that into your Rockworks so that you knew where it's basically taking the well logs and saying this is sand, this is gravel,
Yeah,
And then there's sampling that's done at certain levels within those. Was that part of Rockworks too?
yeah, I put together something along those lines.
But it was a one-shot deal, right? It's not an ongoing thing.
I don't know if it's, I mean, it's, I provided Larry with that data when he was doing his modeling to help support him through his modeling, and his students did whatever they did with it. But basically, the raw data is electronically available for anybody to see. It's the boring logs. All I did was manipulate the boring logs like making, this is electronic data. So
It's not on the DEQ website.
no, it's not on the DEQ website. It's
Something they would have to ask for.
Gee, I don't even know if it's like on my computer anymore. I'm on my second or third computer since I've been doing this. And those are like in transition kind of files I create to look at something, to evaluate a specific condition. Whether we're in court and I'm evaluating conditions, so it's hard to keep a confidential side and a non-confidential side, in this process. It's difficult when you're dealing with data that's public.
So here are all the data points that he's talking about.
So yeah, in every one of those data points, we have a boring log, except for some of those groups where the res wells are, the boring logs are.
You don't have it for everything.
No.
These are just the comprehensive set of all the boring locations. We don't have an analysis of which ones are missing which data, but you don't see a lot of point dots around this area.
So 3365 is a well that falls within their building footprint that they would want to have abandoned and re-drilled. I think they're willing to re-drill a well on the site to make up for it. It just would be moved to a different location.
Are they
I don't
willing?
know how that works with Gelman's
They
access
have,
agreements, but would there be potential if they re-drilled that well to vertically profile and collect samples to get a better idea?
Gelman has some type of access agreement to, wherever they have wells. I was in contact with the developer and told him he needs to talk to Gelman, because that well 3365 is on an approved monitoring plan. So there are options, and Gelman would be the one to come to us and request, changes or whatever. So I think that's the process they're in right now. The other thing, just realize that this infiltration requirement is, City of Ann Arbor,
No, it's a
Washtenaw
county
County is a
requirement.
county
County
requirement.
requirement.
And as far as DEQ is concerned, we're not going to say no to development. We're going to work with the people to, develop environmentally contaminated properties. So it's really not in our, we would be interested in finding having information like you've been, and looking at that, but right now it's not a state issue. The permitting is as a local issue, and we have not been asked to analyze or evaluate any potential problems with an infiltration.
Well, I think that's why they're here today, is to ask you to, because there's an EPA guideline for situations like this.
Well, the responsibility ultimately is on the developer to meet all portions of 201. They have a due care obligation not to exacerbate. I think the lack of sampling around this area, as you were saying, is a function of the conceptual site model, not really pointing to the need to do shallow sampling in that area. If we know there's a competent clay layer, the water they're drawing from is deeper, the current property isn't going to I wouldn't necessarily consider there to be extra water being added to the system. If anything, the water may be directed in a different way than it would be now, which is just direct infiltration through the ground. Any kind of footings or anything they drilled wouldn't go that deep. Any contamination that was found on site would need to be handled as part of the soil management plan, the groundwater management plan.
Right. Let me go back to what I was going to talk about here. Give you an overview of the site regarding the Lockwood development. So this is the location of it, right off Jackson Road, just east of Wayne. Now,
Is this currently Scioto Township site, or is it's already in the city?
it's already annexed to the city.
Not added.
So one of the things you have to realize here is that let's take away the deep plumes. Because if we're talking about infiltration, it's going to go through the intermediate aquifers first. So this is what the Gelman's characterization of the plume looks like at that point. So this is the plume that's heading off to Evergreen and then apparently north from there. So this is right smack dab in the middle of the D2 plume.
So what's the high number underneath there?
That's not important because what's coming there is even higher. Potentially coming, there's some new offshoots there. Like here
But then what's this, are you concerned about the residents of that place? Are you concerned with?
I'm concerned about the movement of the plume, but let me give you the background on this. So this is what we think the plume looks like. It's right smack dab in the middle of that. So if the infiltration pattern here changes, that could change the movement of the plume. We don't know.
Well, you got a 2D. If you go 3D, there's a significant depth difference between the contamination and
All right, let's go 3D.
that area, right?
Let's go 3D. Because even if it's 100 feet, you could still have infiltration changes, right?
My professional opinion is there's no way you're gonna add more water to the system from this development. That's the whole.
But where you add it could make a difference.
Well, zoom out again. I mean, look at how much area you have there of already things infiltrating. That little footprint's not gonna affect a large issue like this.
I remind you, we don't know how 1,800 parts per billion got up here to ever. There's no known, we haven't defined the pathway here. So this is what's presumed, but how this actually got up here, we don't know. So let's work with what we have.
It migrated there.
Yeah.
We know how it got there.
How? There's no
The release
monitor.
was up here and now it's over there, so you know it got there by going there.
Right,
It
so.
didn't get released there, it got released up by the property, and that's where it's at now.
Right.
And it's in a much.
And somehow it got
deeper
over here, then made its way up here supposedly, through this area.
at a significantly depth below ground surface.
I'll remind you that this area is also where, let me see if I can find it here. This is what Gelman says, this is the transition zone between the shallow aquifers and the deep aquifers. Remember that?
This is on municipal services, right, water and sewer?
Yeah.
Right. So it's not gonna affect, but I mean, there might, if the shallower ever gets up here, then we might have to worry about vapor intrusion, just like we do near West Park. I'll get to that in a minute. We're talking about the underground plumes here. This is where this transition between the shallower aquifers to the deeper aquifers, according to Gelman's own projections. So keep that in mind, that the supposed clay layer that's protecting aquifer, one aquifer from another. I remember them telling back in the early days that don't worry about the deeper aquifers because it's only at the core and there's a laterally extensive clay layer that's going to protect the underlying aquifers. And then when we made them go down to bedrock around the site, and when it turns out, oh, there's another whole deeper aquifer. Boom. This whole deep aquifer was not sampled for 7 or 8 years. And suddenly, boom, it's there. It's been going on for years. So we know that trusting that there are clay layers, laterally extensive, protecting lower aquifers from infiltration or whatever, I take that with a grain of salt.
I'm not even considering it. I'm just saying that development like this historically has not added significant amounts of water. You're adding concrete.
No, but where you're adding it
funneling
can make
away.
a difference. So let's go
I
in
would
and look
agree
at.
if you were grabbing millions and millions of gallons of water and you were pumping it in one pipe into one part of the plume.
Yeah, but would you like to
That's
look
not
at,
what's gonna happen.
would you like to
And
look at their,
on the other side.
the
I was-
developers' information on that?
Let him finish.
That is kind of what they're planning, I think. We directed in one spot.
Yeah.
No, a couple spots.
So they're planning on doing deep water injections.
No, it's
But
an
there's
infiltration
some-
gallery, it's a bed, you know, infiltration. that
And
showers.
currently, it's a bed of,
It's
soil.
It's just soil, it's,
in that, even if you said that whole property, if you only put a little corner of it, I still would not be concerned with it overly groundwater flow of a deeper aquifer.
Yours,
I mean, this is my professional opinion, just sitting here in this meeting. I mean, I haven't even dove into the specific data with this thing.
you've seen this map?
I've seen this map, I mean, I've seen the map of their development.
Right. You've seen this?
What does that show, Roger?
This shows where the existing water flows are at the surface, where the infiltration goes down.
So it looks like it's all centered around the one site. So basically, it's all infiltrating currently in this generic area.
Right.
So if they decide to take this and they say they
This
move it
is like a
here,
We're
groundwater
gonna move it up.
research area.
up
they're gonna move it up here.
to the left.
So if they take this area here and they move it here,
To the left.
To the left, toward the left
Here.
circle, yeah, in that area, yeah.
so you got all these arrows pointing in. You draw a line right here. You say right now it's basically infiltrating right here in this big area.
Mhm.
They're gonna take that area and they're gonna make it here.
Right, because that area you just pointed to is right in the middle of the building.
Well, they're outside of the, if I understand the drawing they sent me, it's outside of that.
They
that-
changed it.
No, I'm saying that the natural, what's there now, the groundwater flow is kind of down to here, so it might be, this might be a groundwater recharge area now. And what they're gonna be putting in is a building right in the middle of that. Right? Now, let's take a look at where these other areas are. These boundaries here, the water tends to flow north or northwest. Here, surface water tends to flow west. With me? This is from their own maps. Now, what are they gonna do in the future? They're gonna replace that with get this to show up here. These are the areas that it. Turn this guy off, that's what's hiding it, there we go, okay. And I might as well turn off this Gelman transition zone too. Ah, that's better, okay, now we can see it better. So again, this was the map of where the infiltrations are currently according to their analysis. Most of it's going to the center here. A little bit here on the east is going to the first sister lake. This is going to north, northwest. This is going west. And these are the two areas that they're going to infiltrate into.
You basically identify them as subsurface infiltration beds.
Right.
Required.
So all of this area here is going to be concentrated in here, except for a little bit in the peripheral that's gonna be shunted off to the first sister lake. So if you
And
remember
I take it,
what
would that have an
direction.
overflow as well in case of significant rain event? I mean, there's always gonna be some max flow through that bed.
That could happen, especially over time. We're talking about decades, climate change, blah, blah, blah. But, I mean, even regardless of that, if you infiltrate in these areas, which way is the water gonna flow?
Down.
It's gonna go west, and it's gonna go north and northwest.
The infiltrated water.
What?
Infiltrated water is gonna go down.
It's gonna go straight down until it gets to the regional or the local groundwater table. The same water table that was on.
What was happening originally? If water's released here,
Well,
Near
you're acting
surface.
as though if I drop a molecule of water here, that molecule's gonna roll this way.
right,
But that's, I mean, this is vacant, so that water's gonna infiltrate in the ground. The only time it wouldn't infiltrate in the ground over some distance would be if this was already so saturated that it couldn't take any more water. Or right after a significant drought where the water doesn't easily get into the ground because the capillary fringe has been broken and is being replaced.
so all of this water that's in this whole area is gonna be concentrated into these two areas, these, the white outline.
And control. It'll be controlled in those areas.
Yeah, but
Right now, there's no control. The water falls.
that will create a head at some point.
I mean, as a geologist, I agree that it'll make a head, but I don't think that head, or that head increase would be insignificant when compared to what you have now. It would be negligible to zoom out and see the plume. It would be negligible to that plume. I mean, that's my professional opinion, just looking at the data you presented today.
If this contamination were near the surface, would you change your opinion?
I mean, if it's at 1 foot, I still don't know whether. or
No,
not
if it was, say, 20 foot.
I guess you'd have to run numbers at that point to actually determine if you were, I still think you'd be negligible in the effect of you're already adding it to the system.
So you're making a conclusion without actually looking at the data.
I'm making a conclusion based on my experience,
Okay.
20 plus years, Roger.
That's good.
I still
So
think,
I would,
yeah, I would
think you
say,
would want to keep some of those comments to yourself.
I still would say that it would be very valuable, and the city should require some near-surface testing to determine if there is none or negligible or zero 1,4 dioxane near the surface.
Well, that could be, but even if you find non-detect, which you're probably going to do, because look, it's a half
But
mile
the
away.
tests haven't been done, so you're gonna put a building on top.
Well, some of the testing has been done because they've done borings.
Yeah, but.
So let's this boring here, for instance,
But
would be a
actually,
good
you-
example of it.
I'm worried about it infiltrating into the building, not, 3 blocks away.
But Vince, keep in mind that there are shallow groundwater
Well,
flows in this direction.
Right.
So I'm not so much concerned about right now, I'm concerned about a few decades from now.
I'm concerned about now as well. And
Yeah.
there's no real test to determine that the near surface exposure is not gonna happen. And I think that should be done. I think Donaher could pay for it. I think it's reasonable and prudent to do those tests. And if they haven't done them, I'm not sure why that's not been done. That does not seem like good planning to me. Because we know this could infiltrate into the building, and we have great examples of that already. We have Petoskey, they had to evacuate 14 condominiums that were like a couple years old because this contamination infiltrated into the building. We have the same situation potentially in Ann Arbor at Broadway, where they're gonna be building on top of a
Vapor
contaminated site.
intrusion of
Yeah.
dye-cleaning chemicals is very different than what's bad.
Well, we know there's contamination at this site, we know it can infiltrate into buildings, and it needs to be tested on the site. I don't think there's any question on that. I mean, it's poor planning to allow it to go forward without those tests being done. And a definitive analysis as to where there may be near-surface exposures or not.
I thought we started this conversation with the idea that the contamination was deep and that was supported by the conceptual site model. Now, there is a belief that in this area there's shallow dioxane contamination in the area of this building? This proposed building?
We have no information. That's,
Other than a conceptual site model and the body of evidence that we have that is the Gelman site.
right.
You know that in 93, there was 5,700 parts per billion right here.
At what level?
That worked out.
Yeah, with that, yeah.
Well, here's the available well for that.
It's at 900 feet.
There's no screen.
We don't have that data.
It's
It's probably about 60 to 100 feet deep.
You can't make that assumption.
Just 60 feet.
No,
You don't have that
no,
data. You don't
no,
have
we can't make that
It's
assumption.
on the well log, publicly available on
But it's not in our database.
it's not in your database.
And this isn't in your database.
No.
This data is not in your database.
I don't know if it is or isn't, Roger, but I'm not gonna argue with that.
Because this came from Gelman. Used to be in their database, but it's not anymore.
That is the problem with using residential, old residential wells monitoring points. That's a lot of times if they're too old, we don't have that. Drilling records.
Whoa. We have the records for this.
You have the drilling record from that Ferry Street well?
No,
that was
but we
drilled?
have,
That's
we
what I
have
was
the
speaking of.
sampling record.
I'm talking about the drilling record to know the depth of the well.
To match up, where's that contamination at?
Right.
Is that 30 feet or 130 feet?
Right.
And that's,
If they sampled it in 93, don't you think they know how deep it was?
No, not if it was drilled back in the 50s.
How would they sample? They know how far down the line
The
was.
submersible pump? Drilled into the
I think
surface?
there's sampling from the pump in this case, which is probably true.
Yeah. I mean, it's the most important thing, what's the developer's plan to allow for continued monitoring if they're planning on plugging those wells? That to me sounds like the most important thing to understand.
And I kind of show you, we are having discussions with them on that. Because they asked us, they want to abandon that well.
we said we weren't.
We kind
we
of
said
don't
we-
want it abandoned
Right, I told them,
specifically, but that if it needs to be moved for development, there is an open negotiation about where we would replace that well. And of course, the replaced well will have all the bells and whistles as far as documentation of depths.
and realize that, again, I basically told the developer, you have to go to Gelman. Gelman is required to sample that well under a approved sampling plan. So if you're going to do something to that well, DEQ's opinion is we'd like that and keep that information. So they're gonna have to come to us and ask to take it off the sampling plan, and we'll evaluate that at that time.
Okay, let me continue on here, because one of the things we're worried about is that what if this changes the direction of the plume, especially if it's shallow? So let's take a look at the shallow monitoring points. You can disregard the push pins because I'm going to talk about those later. So these are the really shallow well monitoring points, which are pretty much at the core in the marshy area. And then as we go down another 10 or 20 feet, we get a few more monitoring points.
So what level are these at, Roger? From what to what?
Well, let's take a look at this one. Let's go.
Just-
In fact, let's go about one here, because I think this one's kind of interesting. Can we get to it? Unclick the wrong one.
Roger, are they building in the marshy area?
Here, this is MW11S.
16?
Bottom of the screen, 16 feet.
I'm not quite getting how you're correlating, that's way over on the Gelman side where
Yeah,
you're concerned about
shallow.
3365.
How did how did contamination that shallow get quarter mile from the site?
Well, you see that little light blue line that goes through there?
Yeah?
There was a lot of dumping that was going on there. In the 90s, when that surface water was sampled, it was in the thousands of parts per billion.
So you're saying that it got from the tributary
That tributary through
south
there
here?
has been defined as both gaining and losing.
Correct.
Meaning, that water could be going, along that creek and migrating shallowly into the wetland area around it,
Right.
going back and forth.
Thank you.
Kind of flushing back and
How
forth.
shallow is that?
That was happening in the 60s, 70s, 80s, before we were even, looking at this. So that's the explanation of all the shallow contamination in and around the creek area, in that area over there.
So
So Roger, how
that's
shallow?
not likely to go
Roger.
twice as far in this direction.
We don't have a creek of surface water body that goes all the way over there to convey it there and bring it there with different conditions.
You do have surface water right here.
Right.
Right next to
Sometimes
the
it's dry
marsh
though, too.
area.
It's not always there. It's sometimes it's dry and sometimes it's pretty wet.
You have information on when it's dry and when it's wet.
I've taken pictures over there a few years ago, right from the corner of the road when there was no water there. And that's been talked about internally over the years as a gaining and losing area. I know when you get further downstream, it's very, very wet, but that's also where they're discharging at about 1,000 gallons, 500 gallons a minute.
I wish the projector was different resolution because then you could show these all at once. So we can look at 2D, it's even shallower.
I'm still not connecting why over on the property.
I'm showing you where we have some shallow groundwater. When we get down to around 50 feet, then we have some really high concentrations.
Yep.
So Roger, point on to this graph, not the graph, that table, where's the elevation? Which entry is that?
Right here.
Top of screen 50,
Okay,
50 feet below ground.
top screen,
This
bottom
is the
screen.
depth, here's the
Okay.
elevation.
All right, well, you're assuming everybody knows this stuff.
So somehow it got from here to there. And then if you go out a little farther, you got this, which is another 8 feet deeper. So over time,
It keeps dropping. It's getting deeper and deeper as it goes.
right.
Mhm.
So the question is, what's going to happen to the, all of this concentration here and the really high concentration still back in the soils at the core over time? Because even a clay layer is not going to protect it necessarily. So it just takes longer for water to go through clay than gravel and sand. So what's going to happen over time as you put in more development here? It changes the direction of the flow of the shallower groundwater.
Again, my professional opinion, nothing.
Well, I want to ask the question, what's the resolution to the purported problem?
Well, first define the problem.
We don't have a problem.
And collect some data that would let you make some, decent educated guesses. You're saying there are no near surface water data currently available.
We're saying the body of evidence
The
doesn't
developer,
support and meet.
what you're saying, needs to.
Yeah,
collect
right,
data.
right. This is,
We have no jurisdiction on that,
I know.
it's the local unit of government that, in the requirement of the infiltration bed now, they do have due care and don't exacerbate under what we can regulate, our 201, so.
And they have the due care obligations to
Right.
And even though it's migrating on, they don't even have a nuclear obligation to protect public health in that building. Or I should say that under 201 to mitigate unacceptable exposures because it's a migration on.
I will point out that this boring here, for which there was no well installed, had about 5,000 parts per billion, I think it was, when it was bored in 2005. Here we go.
So it sounds like requests need to be made to the developer or the University
4,000.
Commission to require additional investigations into shallow.
And that's the permitting
Groundwater?
process.
Yes.
I think the DEQ may be asked to give an educated opinion as to whether they could be potentially having vapor intrusion into that building in years, in maybe 5 years, 10 years, whatever.
Well, we need data.
I know, and we need to ask the responsible party
Okay,
because they're the ones that contaminated the site. They should be the ones to be required to show that their contamination isn't going to affect this building.
Would that be a request of all development in all areas?
Sitting on top of a plume like that, I think that's a very prudent thing to be doing. I mean, there's not that many sites on top of a plume at that concentration like that. I think Roger's got a point that we do have some very high surface exposures.
Well,
Within-
again, this is not surface, this is up 100 feet now.
Yeah,
The thing that I'm concerned about is that why is this not, why is this plume here that has wells in the same, why is that not showing that? Why is the conceptual model, why did it ignore this layer of contamination, which is the highest contamination of 2005? Why is that not, there's an unknown here. You have 4,330 parts per billion here in 2005.
and what depth?
Huh?
What was the depth? Did you
About
mention?
100 feet.
Sandy unit about
About 100 feet,
below
but-
surface, with a clay unit above it.
Well, supposedly. But again, there's a transition zone. This contamination got down to this shallower aquifer. And from this aquifer, it got down to a deeper aquifer. From this aquifer, it got down to an even deeper aquifer. Why is this location here, why isn't this examined? It's like in a key area that could affect, that could tell us something about how developments like this might alter the direction of the plume. Why is this not being evaluated?
Roger, I don't know what else we're going to be able to tell you. I mean, I know this is a politically charged development. We have made our piece, we've said what we can say. For the sake of moving the agenda along, I mean, we've noted it, we understand, we're working with the developer on various other issues, and if we believe that there was a need to engage the developer in further communications on either public health and safety or the fact that they would be exacerbating the plume, then we would have those discussions.
What I'm concerned about is the plume being split or pushed one way or the other. So that's my point.
Jerry, you said you're working with the developer on other issues. What other issues?
The well, the other issue.
The monitoring well.
Just the one issue.
I mean, other than if any time we're presented with information that new development's going in a contaminated area, we always at least look at it to verify whether we think there would be unacceptable exposures. I don't know what kind of financing the developer has, but it's pretty rare that these things would be completely 100% privately financed and wouldn't require some level of phase one, phase two, or some level of due diligence being done by the developer, which is all part of, 201 and self-implementing under 201.
I would hope at a minimum, when they replace this well, that they do sampling all the way down. In fact, all the way down to bedrock. All right.
9 minutes left and a 10-minute agenda item left.
Well, let's do it.
All right, so is there a meeting scheduled in September? I haven't heard
I haven't heard anything
anything.
more.
Oh,
Was I on with
Cross
us?
it off.
Well, I.
Yeah, we gotta take care of that.
put it
It's
in
done.
here.
I put it on, I asked if you had it put on the agenda because I thought somebody here would know.
And that's what I was kind of hoping too. At our previous meeting, we had talked about trying to coordinate having Michael Berkoff here. And then we heard from Kathy that Bryce Kelly and Debbie Dingle and Donna Lisinski, the US rep and the Michigan rep, were gonna coordinate having Michael Berkoff come in September. But I guess, does anybody?
I know nothing more than that.
I say, and we have heard it.
Okay.
Just been asking the same questions.
Yeah.
There's no date certain on that.
Okay.
Is that what works?
All right, well, so I guess if anybody does hear anything, could you just pass it on to active members, so that we're all at least in the same level of ignorance?
That's the last time we talked to Michael, you wanted one big meeting with everyone. And if he
Right.
still wants to do that, then every group that we can know of, that we
Yeah.
think of, will be
I
notified.
sent him, you know, he asked for dates like a month or two ago, and I sent him, you know, I
Yeah.
haven't heard back, so.
Okay, so we're all on the same boat here.
Yeah.
Something we can do. Yeah.
Right, okay.
I would imagine it would be late September,
It's gonna
just
have to be.
given everyone's schedules, if nothing's actually planned yet, and I would, we would hear if it was planned. I'll check it.
All right.
I have one more piece of information on an update. I forgot about this one. We've said, Jenny and I always work together each year to come up with a residential well sampling plan. And she has submitted the request for 2019. We're looking at wells. And I just wanted to point out that we, at the request of that last muni agency, people would ask about Liberty Avenue sampling along south of MW 125, Roger, on the property there. And so the request is, Jenny has added wells along there. And they're going to be approved. I just haven't sent back an email identifying, that. And that will be, we're going to get at least a baseline along Liberty. Now,
Where on Liberty?
The whole area.
Starting that way.
Within
Take
600
a dart
feet
out.
south
Go
of,
ahead.
extending about 600 feet south of West Liberty, because there's homes along Liberty and then
If
there's
you
the
wanna-
subdivisions.
we're Saginaw.
This
There's Saginaw Forest right there. So these are the wells that they're going to be sampled, so.
So it's all inside township?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And like I said, this will be the first sampling of those. Now, not necessarily every year, but like we've done at other places, we usually, a minimum every couple of years if there's been no detections. But I did want to point out that we're adding some of the wells that people had some questions on to get at least an initial.
This was one that was south of Liberty
So
that had
two parts.
two parts per billion in 86 and then not detect for the next two readings.
Is that one of the ones? What is it? What's the address?
Who did the sampling there?
420, 4220, Saginaw Court.
It's on here. It'll be sampled next year.
Good. And this is the other one.
What depth are those wells at typically?
We don't know.
No idea.
Well, it's not on the database.
Saginaw, the first one, they're around
Yeah, the
150.
center.
150?
I think so. I have looked at them. Or 200, they're deep wells, somewhere between 150 and 200 probably.
What typically happens as far as for the DEQ file is, we discuss and we work out what we're gonna sample, and then Jenny sends over to me and I get it into the DEQ file, the boring logs if we have, well logs if we have them, if they're available through WellLogic, through any of the?
No, there's a danger of doing this kind of sampling in that you might get a hit. In that it's
Well,
not from the Gelman property, it's from
An old-
laundry detergent going into the sewers, into the septic field.
It's always a, you know,
Certainly always a possibility. but
possibility with,
When you do further investigation.
We try to make sure that all the wells that we know about are well protected from septic systems. It's kind of our core mission. For a variety of reasons, not just dioxane. That being said, I mean, certainly there are some older homes where there might not be permitted systems right,
Yeah.
prior to our septic system permitting in the 60s.
Yeah, well, you know, persistent, highly mobile compounds like dioxane and PFAS. We are learning more and more about this. And I would reiterate my opinion that this site, because of its nature, because it's dioxane by itself, pretty much, should be the study site for how persistent mobile compounds like this move through Michigan groundwater. We should be studying the site as much as we can.
Lemke's doing a lot of
Enough
that,
about
but he would like to
all
do
the
more.
PFAS sites, there are thousands of them popping up now.
Yeah.
And we've got 30 years of pretty good data. We could have more. This, it's right here in our backyard.
So this next meeting with EPA will include any stakeholders that are interested.
Yeah, it sounds like it's gonna be an open meeting,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, that's good. That's exactly what we need to do.
Oh, when I'm invited.
So are we adjourned?
I motion that we adjourn.
Second?
In favor?
Aye. All right, we're adjourned.
Early.
11:59 a.m. Was I talking a little slow?
Done by 11.
No, it's correct.
Yeah.
2 minutes.